Hi, my name is Kevin McDonald, and I'm declaring my independence. Independence from what? Why, negative thoughts and energy, of course. Chief among them, hate, division, and fear. You see, I know that we're all one, and together we can solve any problem, save our planet and each other. Please, join me as we come together as one and choose a better way to be. So now, let's begin with my independence report. Normally we do this earlier in the day, but I have an actual, real working professional that's on the with me today, and I'm so excited. I've been trying for a very, very long time to have a real qualified, honest to goodness therapist come on, because gosh knows I need all the therapy I can get. But she's extraordinary in the work that she does. She has a new book that's out that we're going to talk about, and we're going to talk about her and her name is Annabelle Bugatti, but I'm just going to call her Dr. Bell because I can say that a lot better. Doctor, how are you today?
I'm excellent. Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
I'm awesome, thank you. It's a beautiful day, and actually, it's not. It's snowing up here. We're going to get our. I live in Seattle, so we're going to get our annual 2 inches of snow overnight and tomorrow. So that'll shut down everybody and shut down the community because we're all crappy drivers. But it's, what do you do? What do you do? We just make it. So let's talk about. I wanted to talk about you and what you do. You're a therapist, and you do marriage counseling, and you do singles counseling. You do it all, and you work in Vegas. So I imagine you've got lots of business.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you teach gambling abstinence and that kind of thing too? Get people away from that?
If only. Vegas is a very unique environment to do therapy. And I think part of it is because of the culture where vices are so catered to. And I mean, they put neon signs and advertise to pull into anybody's vice. You name it, it's welcome here. It doesn't matter what age you are. So there's lots of ways for people to get into trouble here, and they do. And, also because of the gambling and the addiction culture, it's very much an instant gratification. And that runs right into therapy too, because much of authentic change in therapy is it's not something that can happen instantaneously. So a lot of people, they come in wanting some kind of a quick fix, and it's like, well, it's just not realistic, so you're constantly fighting these uphill struggles within the culture here that nobody knows anything about except the people that live here. It's like living on an island, except we're surrounded by land, a landlocked island.
Exactly. Well, this is America. We want everything overnight. We want it to be instant gratification and all that kind of good stuff. Let's talk about you. How did you get started in this? I know this is your passion, but how did you early on when you were a kid, did you say, I'm going to grow up and be a therapist?
No, actually, I wanted to be an actress, which is really funny.
There you go.
And actually, all the reasons that I was passionate about acting, I've actually been able to get through being a therapist, which, whenever you watch a really powerful movie, the actor really does a good job. They sort of reach in and touch your heart, touch your soul, touch your psyche in some way that delves you into all of this deep intrapsychic introspection. And, you walk away and you're touched deeply, you're moved deeply, your life is being radically reevaluated. And so that was something that I wanted to help create for people. And, I had a love of psychology, and, going to college, there were so many things that I was interested in. And it was a matter of finding the one thing where you could suffer through all the other classes that you didn't want to put up with to study all the way. So, in psychology, it was something I always kept coming back to. And then it wasn't until after my own experience with divorce that I really became passionate about, because, I grew up in a religious household, and divorce wasn't something that was a part of our value system. So it took a lot of courage for me to be able to make a decision that was right for me, and grappling with how that intersected with my value system. And so I kind of turned that into an opportunity to help others. It's like now, I had all these beliefs going into it. Now I've been to the other side of the fence. So if I can help other people learn from what I've gone through, then maybe I'll have turned this into something good. So that's kind of how I got into it.
One of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is that I'm really excited about passionate people that are interested in helping humanity and helping people get from where they are, which is not very good in most cases, to where they'd love to be, and to help them through it. It's got to be rewarding at times when it's successful, is it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're walking with people through some of their darkest moments, through some of their deepest secrets, most shameful parts, and you're helping those parts heal. And that is incredibly rewarding when you watch somebody, go from deflated and just their life crumbling apart, to walking out of there with their head held high, their heart repaired, they're successful, they're not only giving love, but they're finally recognizing that they're worthy of love and they're accepting it, and their life is totally transformed. It is such an amazing feeling, and it's a total blessing too. I learn so much from my clients as much as they learn from me. So
Oh, that's awesome. How do you get that? I call it people's stories. The stories that we tell ourselves, that people have been telling us since we were little kids, which is why sometimes we don't have very good self-esteem. And then how do you get people to change their story?
well, and that's a little bit of a complicated process, but the overview is quite simple. So it all comes back to attachment, which is really the essence of the counseling that I do with people and the book that I've written. So all life boils down to attachment, right? So attachment science is the essence of life. It is a science of human behavior, emotion regulation, and bonding. And basically, the experiences we have as children, the metaphor I use is kind of like when you are building a house and you lay the foundation and you pour that cement, for the cement foundation. You can't just start building the house on it right away while it's wet. It's highly impressionable. Anything you do to it while it's wet and hasn't fully set is going to leave a mark. And that's like our formative years in our household. Those are our first relationships with other human beings, and those become our blueprints for other relationships in the world. So we tend to respond to others the way we were responded to, or we formulate these positions where we try to go completely opposite because it felt so terrible, but not everyone has that awareness. And so again, the way we were responded to also shapes how we view ourselves and how we view others in the world. So we're constantly making sense of these things. So, when bad things happen to you as a child, and these bad things may not be as obvious as they are in some people's homes as they are in others. Some people didn't have abuse or neglect, but it can be just as simple as being rejected by a parent, being brushed aside, being neglected, which is very insidious. Because it's so subtle and people don't really recognize the far-reaching impacts of that. But it can be just as simple as, watching your parents fight all the time, and then, observing like maybe the way dad responds to mom, and then kind of viewing that as like, this is the way I need to be, is that dad's always shutting down mom. She doesn't have a voice. So if I want to be on dad's good side, I just need to go along. And so you kind of learn, implicitly, sometimes explicitly, these messages about yourself. They start formulating, and so that can be internalized as how I feel and what I want isn't as important as just being pleasing to someone else so that they don't reject me. So, and sometimes the messages are very explicit. I've had people who've told me their parents have flat out said, I wish you were never born, and ouch, that's pretty hard.
Yes.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not even the parents. It can be like the kids at school, the bullies, who just tell you that you're worthless, or, they just get it in their bonnet to go after you, and they make your life misery. And, you get these messages from multiple sources as a child, and all these go into that bucket to help you, develop how you see yourself. And so part of it is recognizing where those come from and how those were born, and being able to sit with the evidence, challenge the evidence, and build a new system where you start to expand that idea that, okay, maybe I am important. Maybe I can be imperfect and still be loved. Maybe I can have a voice, and people aren't always going to reject me and shut me down and say, no, what you want isn't important. You just need to shut up and go along with whatever I want, So
Well, we don't want to. Yeah, no, I agree. So now I'm a little older now, and so I've been around, families and family situations, my own family and others. Is everybody as dysfunctional as I think they are?
Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, everybody has their own brand of dysfunction. I'm going to be perfectly honest with it. And I think there's actually a very real reason for that. So you have, so the people that you're seeing now, so the younger generation, these are the product of the children who are children of the baby boomers. And so the baby boomers, came out of the World War II. They were children of parents from the World War II era. And, their style of living everyday life was in survival mode. They weren't a very enlightened generation. Enlightenment was kind of a luxury that they didn't have time for. They had to pay bills. There was wartime. It was a struggle as to how are we going to feed the family. And so they didn't think about happiness. That wasn't really an option. Like when you selected a job or selected a partner, you find that people's reasons for marrying were similar to their job selection. Was economic survival. Is this person going to help me survive versus do they really make me happy and am I in love with them? Sure, there's some chemistry and such, but you found so many people who are just getting in to ensure their survival and they didn't think about that. And so now as we've gotten less dependent on that survival because everyday living has gotten easier, people are more enlightened, they're more educated, they have more free time to think about happiness, and that becomes a bigger ingredient. And so that needs to factor in, but they're being taught how to have securely attached relationships by people who knew nothing about it, right? Who didn't have those skills, who were in survival mode. So they're teaching survivalist skills to an enlightened generation, and the two don't really come together. It's a completely different skill set. So people are just entering into relationships very unequipped. So now they're entering for love, and they're being taught by people who entered into relationships for very, very different reasons. And they don't understand, like, why do you need to be happy? Why are these things an issue? Back in my day, it was such a struggle to have corn on Sunday, and things like that. So that's a really big reason why I think there's so much more dysfunction nowadays. It's just because people weren't taught how to have great relationships, because that wasn't a necessary ingredient for relationships back in those times.
And it certainly wasn't modeled in my household, because they, and my dad has openly said, when he was still with us, that he openly said, well, love wasn't nearly as important back then. It was more along the lines of exactly what you said. Yeah. It's about survival, and it's about she could cook, and she was willing to raise the kids, and meant that I didn't have to, and so I could go do my own stuff. Let's by the way, we're talking with Dr. Bell, and I just love that. And let's get into your book a little bit and bring that out early so that folks can understand what it is. And it's using relationships.
It's called Relentless Empathy. Using relentless empathy in therapeutic relationships, connecting with challenging and difficult clients. Technically, my book was written for anybody in the helping profession, the mental health field, whether you're a social worker, an addiction counselor, a pastoral counselor, a MFT, psychologist, whatever. But I've had a lot of people who aren't therapists read my book, and they said they absolutely loved it and got a lot out of it. So, bottom line is it's a manual on how to be in relationships with people that you find really difficult to have relationships with. And that's important, because we're never not in relationship. And think about it, like every other human being on the planet you're in a relationship with. Again, the type of situation is going to determine the degree and intensity of the relationship. Maybe it's just like a simple customer relationship where they're a customer of your business, but you still have that professional business relationship with them. It could be your neighbor. It could be the pastor at your church. It could be, your mom or your dad, or a romantic relationship, or your coworker. So, and we all have people that come into our life that really challenge us and feel like they make life really difficult. And, as a therapist, it's really important to master the skill of empathy. And yes, it's not only a feeling, it's a skill that can be honed and taught, and it's essential because, you know, people who are difficult are most of the time the people who need the most empathy and love. And if we just kind of slap a label on them that says they're a personality disorder, which, you know, it drives me crazy, is that a lot of therapists have gotten in this habit where now these diagnostic terms that were supposed to be helpful so that people could get the help and we know how to help them have now become terms of judgment, labels of judgment. And, you know, we label something personality disordered, which is just code for difficult. And then we like try to pass them off to somebody else, like, I don't want to deal with them. Then they never end up getting help. And then they keep getting dumped in relationships, or they're getting isolated because no one wants to be in a relationship, and nobody will stick around long enough to help them recognize what's happening and why all of this is going on in their life. And so if you can find a shred of empathy for them, it'll be a lot easier to get close enough to them and create some kind of openness that they're willing to take in the information and hopefully change. And plus, not all relationships you can cancel. And if you just cancel every relationship, then we'll just be alone. So
You're living in a cave somewhere all by yourself. You know, I don't think that in my entire life I have seen such, and which is why I use the title Hate, Division, and Fear. I have never seen the degree of hatred, division, fear of the other, you know, not wanting to get together, not believing that even within, you know, this is one country, we're supposed to be one tribe, and we've split into and it makes it very difficult. I have friends who are no longer friends because we had a deep-seated political argument one time about what they believed, what I believed, and it made it impossible for us to continue. Are you finding that in families, in relationships, and all over the place?
Never ever before have I seen households turned apart from each other. I mean, I guess when you watch movies about the Civil War, you would see this where you have some family members fighting for the North and the South, and that's kind of what it's turning into. And is that what we want to have, is a civil war where you have mother and son divided, where son's saying, I just can't come over to your house because you're this political affiliation, or you voted for this person. I mean, that's literally what it's coming down to. And people are being fired from jobs because they might have posted some sort of political meme just as a joke, not even like an actual label as to, oh yeah, this is the tribe that I go with, you know. And so there really isn't freedom anymore, which is really disappointing and scary all at the same time. And you know, and actually that's a chapter in my book. I talk about how to apply so I teach people a little bit about the skills that I use in therapy. And I talk about how to not only apply these to other people, but how to apply them to yourself, how to walk your talk. And it was because of an experience like what you're talking about that inspired it. I had a colleague and therapists, I don't know what it is, just politics have gotten the hands have gotten way too deep into mental health. And that's really unfortunate because politics should not be determining mental health. And so you have people just, you know, again, firing and doing all these things that are completely unethical. And so I actually had a colleague that we were commenting on a Facebook post, and, you know, some of these things you try to let them slide by you, but every once in a while there's that one you're like, I just can't not say something. I gotta say something. And so I said something, and then my colleague is like, wait a second, are you saying this? And then you can see it. Uh-oh, I'm in trouble. Here it goes, you know? And so we actually used our therapeutic skills because we're in the same model of counseling together. And we actually used our skills to work it out. And it was amazing, even though we still have completely different political affiliations. The whole point was that we were able to connect and see that at the very core of it, we both wanted the same things, even if we disagreed on how to get there. And again, it was because we used our skills of empathy and we're able to work our way through the conversation. And that's what it is, you know, people claim to be so tolerant, yet they're not. It's like, and if you really want to check and see if you're tolerant, ask yourself, am I willing to be in relationship with, and can I hold space for somebody that has a different point of view, especially when I vehemently disagree with that point of view, right?
That's really hard. By the way, there's a guy by the name of Ron White. I always have to give this quote to him because he said it first, and that is,
you can't fix stupid, Ron White.
yep, that you can't fix stupid. One of his favorite ones that I've used in my life is I have the ability to remain no, I have the right to remain silent. I just don't have the ability. And there are times when you get into that political space and somebody says something that in your frame of reference is so out there and so based in fantasy land that it's hard.
It's just inflammatory. It's not even like we're trying to see facts. We're just outright attacking people. And that never feels good. It's like, because I say this, now you're jumping to all these horrible conclusions about who I am and what I must believe in terms of humanity. I mean, that nobody wants to be thought of in that way.
Right. So how do you help people? Now, when you talk about empathy, describe what you mean by empathy a little bit more.
So empathy is the ability to resonate with another person's experience in a deeper emotional level. It's not the same as sympathy, which is kind of like resonating with their experience, but from a more detached space. Like, I get it, that feels bad, but I'm not really connected with you in that space. Whereas empathy, it's like I'm able to channel your experience through accessing anything even close to that experience in my own emotional memory system. And I'm able to channel what that feels like to go through that in a way that helps me be with you and connect with you. And empathy is always in service of other people. And it helps people be seen and really feel like you get them in the deepest sense. And I think empathy is very misunderstood because you have people walking around saying, I'm such an empath and I feel everything so deeply. And I'm like, okay, being able to feel other people's emotions isn't quite the same as having empathy. Empathy is a tool, it's a skill more than a feeling of just, I can feel your emotions. It serves a function. The whole purpose of empathy is because it turns on our caregiving system so that we turn towards another and offer them care. And that's how humanity gets along. So, I mean, and people don't realize this is actually wired into it. So this is why it's so essential when somebody is in pain or distress, not to look away, but to actually look at them. And they've shown that looking at them activates the mirror neurons in your brain, which are essential for empathy, because it turns on your caregiving system so that you turn towards that person, offer care. So, and you've probably been in situations where, you've told somebody about an experience that felt really bad, or you just went through something really bad and you wanted to tell a friend, but you didn't want to just hear like, oh yeah, that sucks. It's like, no, I want to know that you actually know what I'm going through.
I want you to sympathize with me and be empathetic towards my situation because it really sucks, and I want you to agree with me.
We can actually physically feel the difference between sympathy and empathy, because sympathy feels more like can be kind of patronizing sometimes, like, oh yeah, I really feel so bad for you, but I don't feel with you. And empathy is like, yeah, I know what that's like. I've been through that, or I've been through something really close to that, and I remember how bad that felt. So I can totally imagine what this was like. And that, yeah, I totally get that. You can actually feel it in your body. This is why you'll have girlfriends, they'll crawl up to their honey and they'll tell them the story, and they're just like, I kind of get that. And they're like, no, I don't really feel like you get it, because they're not empathizing, So
guy, give me something to eat and a football game to watch, and we'll be fine.
Yes. But, so, it's when you do get that empathy, your body knows the difference, and it's like, okay, I can relax. I can let this go because I feel like you actually get me. And then I feel connected to, and that's all I need to feel better. There's actually a science to it. It shows that our brain releases positive chemicals, like you have serotonin, dopamine. You also have oxytocin, which is not a cuddle hormone. It's a bonding hormone. It's supposed to stimulate bonding. So, when you get stressed, your body actually releases adrenaline. It releases cortisol. And so when you get secure connection, and empathy is a way to get that, your brain will actually start releasing the dopamine, the serotonin, the oxytocin, all of which will counteract the cortisol and the adrenaline. So it actually physically helps you to have that connection. So that's why it's so important. And again, why people can actually physiologically feel the difference.
You know, it's interesting. Do you have a lot of relationship people, as in romantic relationships, husband and wives, that are going through? See, I was married for 24 years, and the first year was great. And no, I'm kidding. It was fine for a long time, but over time we kind of separated and went our separate ways, even though we were still married, until it got to the point where it was like, why are we even here, kind of thing. And does that happen a lot, in especially with people that disagree, or they come from different religious backgrounds or different political parties, and does that in your work, are you able to save, I guess are you able to save those folks from themselves?
Oh, yeah. And look, it's not ethical for a therapist to tell you you should get divorced or break up. So if you have a therapist who is saying that, run.
That's good to know. That's good to know.
They're not supposed to be doing that. Is completely unethical. And yes, there are couples who, they talk about compatibility issues. We're just so different. Differences should not be a reason to not be in a relationship. It's about whether or not we can get connected. And when we can't get connected, then those differences become amplified and they become stronger, and then they feed into the disconnection. Versus when a couple is really connected, those differences don't matter and they're not relationship killers, and they're able to come together and negotiate those spaces in a way that leaves both people feeling really good. So yeah, you can definitely save those couples.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, do you do a lot of couples therapy when they're both in the same room at the same time?
Absolutely. That's how I prefer to do couples therapy, is with both people of the couple in the room.
Can't that get a little dicey at times?
Yes. Oh, I've been in some interesting situations, and there's times where I've had to put the pillow in between the couples. So I'm like, hey, sometimes I feel like I wish I had a whistle where I could blow it, like, stop.
Timeout. Let's do a TV timeout and go have a cup of coffee or something.
Yes. So there are moments, but luckily I use emotionally focused therapy, which has been rigorously studied, and there's actually outcome research on it. So we've studied the actual model, and we know how it works and why it works. And that's important to me because, before I was a therapist, I went through marriage counseling, and I had some pretty terrible marriage counselors, to be quite honest. And I thought, I don't want to give my couples anything like that. So it's a no-brainer to me. Why don't you use the thing that's been tried and true and tested to be effective? And it's most effective. So I use it. I'm super highly trained in it. I'm a continuous student of it because, again, first and foremost, I want to be a great therapist and help my couples. So I continue to learn and grow, and I know how to handle those situations, so I'm not afraid.
Now, what is this system that you were just talking about? I'm unfamiliar with it.
Emotionally focused therapy. It was pioneered by Dr. Sue Johnson. She's done some work with the Gottmans, and it's funny because even John Gottman, most people know John Gottman, the Gottmans name, they're pretty famous, but John Gottman actually says that Sue is the best couples therapist in the world. So what does that tell you?
She must have saved their marriage.
Yeah. and the Gottmans are great researchers, but their model of counseling isn't really rooted in anything. It's just kind of randomly strung together. So, and they haven't actually done research on their interventions themselves to figure out if they're actually working. So they've had one or two very, very basic studies, and all they've proven is the thing that we already know that they teach us in grad school, that some therapy is better than no therapy, and that's all the outcome they've gotten. Whereas EFT, emotionally focused therapy, we actually know what about it is working and why it's working and how it's working, because we've just studied it that much, and we've studied it on multiple populations: soldiers with PTSD, people with eating disorders, heart conditions, couples from all walks of life, LGBTQ, Christian couples, you name it, it's there for you. So I love it.
Oh, that's awesome, because and you're also, by the way, very good at it. From everything that I've read and everything that of all the reviews that I've looked at, you're pretty darn good at what you do.
Well, thank you. I try really hard. like I said, I don't want to give my couples terrible marriage counseling. I know what that's like to go through. And oh man, some of the experiences I sat through. We had a therapist who came into our house. This was when I lived in New York, who came into our house. And so it's very rare in the West Coast to have a therapist that enters your home, but it's more common in the East Coast, I guess. So this therapist came into our apartment and basically just sat there and watched us tear each other apart for an hour and a half, and then was like, you guys just need to be positive. Just think positive. Hold on to the positive memories. And I just was like, are you kidding me? Like, there's nothing positive in this room right now.
Well, and I told my dear old 90-year-old mother that you were going to come on the show today. Oh. And she says, well, I just hope that what she's going to say is no matter what, you stay together and eventually it'll work out just fine. And I said, Mom, what if he's beating you? And she said, well, that might be a little bit different. And I said, so, we want, people get married for a reason because they supposedly love each other. I went to high school with.
Well, I'll be honest that people don't always get married for that reason. And to be honest, people don't do a good job at vetting their partners. And this is the thing that, okay, I'm just going to be really honest, it really sucks. So people want to blame the institution of marriage as being broken. And it's marriage. There is nothing wrong with marriage. It is not broken. It is broken people getting into marriage thinking it's going to be a magic pill or a magic wand that's going to be a cure-all, that they don't have to do any work. And suddenly now they sign on a dotted line and I don't know, some magical veil encompasses them and all their problems disappear. And it's just not how it works, so it's not marriage's fault. It's, that you didn't do the work. You didn't really vet your partner. You weren't in a healthy place and your partner wasn't in a healthy place. And you kind of just jumped into it thinking, oh, it'll get better without actually changing any of your ways. And it didn't get better. As things tend, it's the basic laws of motion, and an object in motion will stay in motion until acted on by an outside force. So bad habits will tend to stay in place until acted on by an outside force. It says, oh, maybe you should change this.
What do you say? Because I had several female friends from high school that says, oh, I know he's kind of abrasive now, but when we get married, he'll settle down and I'm going to be able to change him.
It's the biggest lie that women tell themselves. It's such a bill of goods. And why do we keep selling this to ourselves and each other? People do not change when they get married. You look at who, and actually sometimes people do. So it's two ways. Either people are exactly who they are and they don't change, or people change dramatically. So either way, you have to be able to look at the person who's right in front of you and love them for exactly them, and be able to see adequately and accurately all of their worst parts. And those worst parts have to be lovable too. And if those worst parts are total deal breakers and you're just thinking, well, those will change, will get better. No. Unless they're like actively pursuing therapy, rigorously trying to change those, no, it's not going to change. So if you can't love that person as they are, assuming that they may never change, then, you're not really getting married for the right reasons. So you got to stop telling yourself, that they're going to settle down as they get married, because no, who they are is who they're going to be unless they decide to change. And some people decide that they're happy with who they are and there's nothing wrong with it, and they dig in and they don't change. And then sometimes you have partners who are very interested in growth and personal development. So again, this is another thing, is that we don't, and so in religious terms, there's this phrase about being equally yoked. And, when I was a kid, that they used to use that as like, don't marry people from other religions. But it is so much more complex than that. And I find that people don't really find partners that are equally yoked. So you have one person who's totally not into self-development and they like who they are, even though they may have some pretty bad habits. And then you have people who are like addicted to self-help and they keep growing and then they outgrow their partner. Well, you didn't even start out on equal playing fields. You guys weren't equally well matched right in that place. Or you have someone who isn't very intellectual and doesn't like to have deep conversations. And you have someone who is very intellectual and likes to be intellectually stimulated. And they're like, let's have a deep conversation. And they're like, ugh. I don't know what to say. Again, not equally yoked, so you got to stop lying to yourself and convincing yourself that these things are going to change. My favorite one is I married them for their potential. Oh my gosh, potential. Okay, potential doesn't mean that they're ever going to amount to anything from that potential. Again, they have to be able to see that potential in themselves and want to do something about it. And this can't come from you, but so many people do this. I hear it more from women, but I actually heard it from a man today. And I was like, no, again, you're just saying, I see the good parts, what they could be, even though they're not that person. And I'm not really loving and accepting who they are. I'm like fantasizing about who they could be and hoping that I'm going to push them into becoming that person. That's what they do, is they try to push them into it. They get resentful, burned out, and the other person gets resentful because they don't feel really loved and accepted. And they're annoyed that they're constantly being pushed into being some other way. Don't marry someone for their potential. Stop lying to yourself.
I tell you, by the way, we're talking with Dr. Bell. She is out of Vegas. She is a wonderful therapist. I'm having a thoroughly good time talking with you. This is a lot of fun. I do have to ask you though, when you look at the grand scheme of things, why is it that we, in order to get a driver's license, now maybe you've heard this before, in order to get a driver's license, you have got to go to class, you've got to study a little bit, you've got to prove that you can drive, you got to prove that you can operate safely when you're going down the road. Yet we hand out marriage licenses and children like candy. It's like, I don't know what you're going to do with this thing, but here you go. You made it. Now here you go. Let's make it work. Should we be working to learn more and to work with each other more and to have more classes involved with this stuff so that people don't make these mistakes?
Absolutely. I do believe that education is great. Although, I've done premarital counseling with early 20s, late teens couples. I say like they're fresh off the funny farm, and I get it because I was 20 and a half when I got married to my high school sweetheart, and that didn't work out so well. And nobody could have told me these things because I hadn't lived enough life and had enough experience to realize the merit of the things that they were saying. So I was like, oh, it'll be fine and whatever. Yeah, I knew nothing. And so no matter how much you try to teach them these skills, they've just not had enough life experience to be able to really know themselves in that place or know how they're going to be shaped or how the relationship is going to be impacted or what they're going to do. So that's kind of a drawback. I do still think it's important, but I really think people should be going to their own therapy and working on just learning how to have better relationships. And we need to stop promoting these anti-attachment, anti-relationship BS that goes around the internet, and because all they're doing is creating more harm and damage. And it's already been proven by science. Like in all different, you have evolutionary science, you have attachment science, you have neurological science, brain science that is proving, demonstrating that attachment and bonding is actually neurologically, physiologically, psychologically, emotionally hardwired into the survival part of our brain. It's part of our survival functioning as a human being. And so to try to, promote this anti-attachment violates the core of our human code. And you wonder why there's so much bad stuff happening. We're supposed to be teaching people how to get together, not saying cancel relationships and just get away and cut people off when they don't serve you. It's how about you actually turn and share with them the impact they're having and tell them it's hurtful and learn how to sculpt those relationships, because some people will never be told that they're being hurtful and they'll never get a clue, and then they'll never change, of course, or how to take in negative feedback or challenging feedback. And yeah, it's hard. You got to suck up your pride, but nobody's perfect. And as soon as you recognize you don't walk on water and you're willing to hear that feedback, then you can actually do something about it and become the person you want to be. But denying it is not going to help you become that person. And then you're just going to become unhealthy, and then you're going to join a relationship as an unhealthy person and then have an unhealthy relationship and then go on to blame marriage as the problem.
And it continues and it goes and it continues and it continues. What do you tell women? And I hate to pick on women, but I know so little about them. I want to learn more. What do you do for the gal who keeps dating the same guy in a different suit?
Well, again, go to therapy and recognize the pattern. What is it you're looking for? And, what's the common denominator other than just you? Most of the time, it's some kind of an attachment need. What I find often is if they're like serial dating, like abusive people or the same type of bad guy, it's a lot of times it's because they've had some kind of trauma as a child. And this is really unfortunate, but this is part of how trauma works. When you're a kid, when you have a lot of trauma, your body actually becomes more oriented towards the chaos. Even though you may know that it's bad and you don't like it, it's also like the devil you know. It's more familiar and therefore more comfortable because you know how to survive in it. And because it was so much the norm that your body actually has no neurological, no template, no emotional template for what safe and secure attachment looks like. So I see this in therapy all the time where it's like people keep gravitating towards those types of relationships because it's just what they know, even though they don't like it. But then when you have them try to take in and internalize, love or care, it's like they go like totally bajiggity and they don't know. I know my friend teased.
Is that a technical term?
Yeah, bajiggity. I got some flack on that the other day by my significant other, and that was really funny. He's like, "What's bajiggity?" It's a word. I hear it. So but they do, like, they get, when you try to help them take in that secure attachment, it's like they have no idea what to do with it. It's so foreign and so alien to them that they just have no map. They just don't know what to do with it. And it's actually really sad in a lot of ways. But again, this won't be corrected unless they're willing to say, maybe there's a problem with me picking the same bad person over, in different suits over and over again. Maybe I should go to a therapist and figure out what's going on here.
That would, because it's so sad to watch. I have female friends that is like, no, you're not going to do that again. You're not, please don't do that again because it's going to end badly. And it's like, oh no, he's different. I'll change him. It's like, oh God, you've just had two of the top three or whatever it is.
There and then is part of the problem, is that I'll change him. It's kind of like, it's almost like a proof of your own value. If I'm really good enough, if my love is good enough, then I'm going to be able to change them. I'm going to be able to love this out of them. And then when it doesn't happen, then you end up again blaming yourself because you assigned that responsibility to yourself in the first place, rather than recognizing it's not you or the quality of your love. It's actually some dysfunction going on with them, but you're not willing to own that and accept it and say, oh, maybe they need to go to therapy and get work, and maybe I shouldn't be in that relationship with that drunk guy.
Yeah.
And two, you got to look at where you're picking up people. If you want to find a healthy partner, shopping for them in a bar or a strip club is probably not going to be the ideal place to find a guy. But sorry, it's Vegas. And yes, there's strip clubs everywhere. But, so many times people are like, yeah, I met him at a bar. I wonder about that.
Yep.
We're loaded when you met. That's a great foot to start off on.
Yeah, my youngest son, who was living with his mom at the time after we broke up, he kept telling me that she used to come home and throw up because the guy she was dating at that after me apparently had an alcohol problem that she tried to keep up with him, and so she would go home and throw up. Anyway, but
that's a problem. When you have to violate your own boundaries or do unhealthy things to keep up with a partner. Yeah.
That's not good.
There's this other thing that I have to say is that, that rule of thumb, when your relationship isn't working, don't add a baby. Like a lot of people try to say, oh, a baby will make it better. I find that people try this by opening their relationship and thinking, yeah, like this relationship is complicated, so let's add another person to this relationship and have it be open. So now it's like an open relationship where we're both able to see other people, and that's going to make this relationship better. Yeah. How's that baby thing working on for you?
It's interesting because I have a friend, and actually it's one of my sons, and he was dating a girl, and apparently I did not know this, but apparently on Facebook and Twitter and some other, you can actually take naked pictures of yourself, and there are groups that kind of delve in that kind of, and it's kind of like a dark kind of. So he got on Facebook by accident one time and saw her in a place that he'd never been and stuff. So we live in really weird times, don't we?
Oh, yes. Apparently, people can pay to be in porn movies. So rather than being paid, if you want that experience, you can pay to be in it. And so, I've had clients come in where they've discovered that their partner was a secret porn star and they've been married for like 15 years. And yeah, this is the thing about secrets is they somehow manage to always find their way out.
I'm an old sales guy, and I was just thinking to myself, now there's a hell of a salesman. I'm going to put you in a porn movie. I'm not going to pay you. As a matter of fact, you're going to pay me.
I know, right? Well, you have the sex addicts going on there, people who, again, have low self-esteem and they find their value by having other people dote on them and say, you're so wonderful and, all this stuff. And that's how they get their value. So they go into, Freud called this sublimation, where you find some kind of socially acceptable way to get that need met. So, like if you like to fight, you're going to go into karate or, whatever. So, if you need that validation, you're going to go into some place where people are going to be looking at you and giving you all types of validation and praise and, so yeah, it's interesting.
We are a complex and unusual animal, aren't we?
Yes. We tend to complicate things that are actually very simple.
We do. We've been talking with Dr. Bell. You've worked all day today, and then you come here and you do this tonight. I really want to thank you for coming on the show. But hold up your book one more time, and we can pick that up at Amazon. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, the reflection of my light is on here. But thank you so much for having me on the show. And you can absolutely pick up my book on Amazon. Again, it's called Using Relentless Empathy in the Therapeutic Relationship, Connecting with Challenging and Resistant Clients. And or you can just look up, I know if you go on Amazon, you can type in Relentless Empathy and it'll come up with my book. It'll be like the second thing down. So, or you can look for Annabelle Bugatti and just find me. Bugatti like the car. No, I'm not related, because I certainly wouldn't be a therapist if I had that fortune. So
no, but by the way, because of the COVID and the way that you're working now, I assume you're working a lot more remotely. Can you take clients from all over the country and do it on Zoom?
Well, okay, so that's a little bit complex. So I do see some clients on telehealth, and I'm actually one of the few therapists who will see people in person, but again, with the screening process. But actually, the way the law is written is that it defines that therapy is taking place where the client is physically located. So I cannot see a client who is in Texas, for example, if I'm not licensed in Texas. So even though we have the ability, you actually have to be licensed. Now with COVID, they've lifted some restrictions or they've made it easier, because some people have vacation homes in other states and they've been quarantining there. So, you have to contact those state boards and find out what their particulars are. California is like super, super strict, but some states it's like, as long as you're not, if you're not going to get licensed there, you can't pick up clients that live there forever. But if your client goes there and for continuity of care, blah, 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 it can be okay. But usually they want you to register, pay a fee or something. So yeah, but technically you're not allowed to cross state lines unless you're licensed in that other state where the client is. So.
And I wouldn't want you to do anything that even remotely might cause somebody to say, hey, you know what? Let's sue them. So, because that does happen from time to time.
That wouldn't be fun, because we are a sue happy culture.
We are. I got sued for $50,000 and spent 2 years fighting it, and it was dismissed without prejudice, which means there was no merit to it. But she just did it because she was pissed off.
That's what people do, right? They don't know how to handle their anger constructively, and so they try to lash out at people and make their lives miserable.
Yeah, absolutely.
More reason to go to therapy. Deal with your anger.
That's right. I want to thank you for coming on the show again. And what I like to do is at the end of the show, I want to give you the forum, your soapbox, whatever you'd like to tell our audience what you need them to hear.
Oh, goodness. Well, thank you again so much for having me on your show. I so appreciate being a part of this. And it's such a blessing to be able to talk to all of you guys tonight. And I guess maybe the main thing to let people know is that, really nobody or no relationship is beyond help if they are both willing to actually work on it. I tell my couples all the time, the only problem that cannot be solved is the one you're unwilling to talk about and deal with. So it doesn't matter how different you feel that you are, there's still a way to bring the two of you together as long as there's a willingness. So, it may feel like there's no hope, but, call an EFT therapist, emotionally focused therapy. You can Google it. There's almost a center in every state, or there's a community of therapists, so you can look it up, or you can go to iceeft.com, ICEEFT.com, and you can type in your zip code, and they're internationally, so you can find them in almost every country. Find a therapist, and whether you're a family, an individual, a couple, they're there for you, and there's plenty of hope left. So. And if you're just interested and curious, read my book. You can visit my website, drbugatti.com, soon to be drbell.com, because we're buying the domain. But, even if you're not a therapist, it's a great read. It's easy. I'm somebody who doesn't like to read books. I write them, but I don't really like to read books, mostly because I don't have a lot of time. So I like books that you can skim and pull out some useful nuggets. And that's how I wrote this book. So I think you can get some, because everybody has like an angry person in their life, or an addict. They've come across addicts, so there's something in there for everybody, even if you're not a therapist. I'm pretty sure you can still get something really good out of it and use it for your relationship. So I hope what I said today has been helpful for everyone. And I just thank you for tuning in, and that you guys keep watching this podcast. And you can also find me on YouTube. I have a channel called We Heart Therapy. You can also find it wherever podcasts are found. Some of my video series are geared towards therapists, but I've had a lot of clients get into them and they really love them. And I just released a video called Let's Talk About Sex, where we're talking about sex and why talking about sex is so hard to talk about. So there's lots of videos on there for the general public. So again, We Heart Therapy on YouTube. And thanks again for having me.
Well, I have to tell you, I did a little series with a gal, and we were talking about kinky stuff and a little bit about sex and that kind of stuff. It came to number one. Suddenly, it was like, if you put adults only next to anything, it'll get a lot of hits. And then, but I did want to say before we went, I went on to your time, and so we're gonna wrap this up. But I love the way you say "my couples," because that means that you're taking ownership in their couples, you're taking ownership in their success, and I just think that's just fabulous. So I thank you.
Thank you. I'm really connected to my couples. They're really great people, and they're really courageous, and it's really a blessing and an honor to walk with them through that journey. So if you're one of my couples listening, thank you.
If they're not now, they will be.
Yeah.
Because this will be up on YouTube. It'll be on my Independence Report, and people can listen to it. And it's been a wonderful interview. So I need to close it out, but if you'll stay with me for after we close it out, I'll be right back. Hey, and thanks for listening to this episode all the way to the end. Hey, pretty cool. Hey, don't forget to follow us so you can receive regular updates and new posts. And remember, take care of each other, because each other's all we've got. See you next time on My Independence Report.